Hey guys, Ponce here on the PBE, here to talk to you guys about Warwick's roles and potential builds you might want to try out on him. Now, at its absolute basic, let's just talk about the roles first. You obviously really only have two options. I mean, you could theoretically carry him somewhere else, but so mainly you're going to look at the top lane and the jungle. Long story short, he's better in the jungle. He's not terrible in the top lane. I'm not going to report you and like start yelling at you if you take him to the top lane. It just feels like a lot of wasted potential, where in the top lane he tends to just kind of sit there and sustain, kind of like a lamer version of current live Warwick, and he just doesn't do very much. His absolute strengths tend to lie in his ability to work with other champions, like following things up. So as the jungle, you're obviously going to be, aside from bottom lane stuff, going to be working with someone else a lot. He's got good ganks with his ult. Blood Hunt works perfectly with other people. He's got CC. He's got a short range dash, so I mean, he does have the ability to kind of get onto people somewhat quickly. And obviously, if he's at the top lane, if someone does come gank for you, yes, you can kind of run people down and whatnot, but that's, more rare than kind of making opportunities happen as a jungler. And as a jungler, he's just so good in the jungle. He's got crazy sustain. He doesn't get low at all. He doesn't even need potions. That's how good he is in the jungle. He kind of runs into the mana issues, but, there are ways around that. So, again, if you want to play him in the top lane, you can. Just know that there is a lot of wasted potential there because you could be playing him in the jungle. Now next, in terms of builds, since I'm saying, he's better in the jungle, all builds will involve like a jungle item, because he's in the jungle. Now if you want to do him in lane and want to think about these builds, just replace the jungle item with something comparable. So anyway, let's start off with what I call the normal tanky build. This is kind of your bog standard stuff. It's mostly following, what you kind of see in here, and I find it to be the best. Spoilers. So anyways, it's a basic Cinderhulk. I will talk about Bloodrazor later. It's not my favorite. You can get away with it, but I just prefer Cinderhulk because of what he does and for reasons I'm going to explain over the course of this build discussion. Spirit Visage is one of the more important items on him. His sustain is really good, and it makes his sustain better, and it makes him tanky, and it has CDR on him. CDR and tankiness are the two most important stats on him to be effective. Basically, anytime, I've mentioned this in the past on a number of my videos, if anytime a character has percentage damage, you want to look at that and typically try and figure out how to exploit that as hard as possible. In Warwick's case, it doesn't scale off of anything, or any offensive stat. It doesn't scale off of AP, it doesn't scale off of AD. What in a weird sort of roundabout sense it does scale off of, however, is CDR and also penetration if you need it. But also, the tankier you get, right, the more times you're going to get Q off. And since essentially my motto essentially for Warwick is the old World of Warcraft DPS adage, dead DPS is no DPS. He deals a lot of damage over a very long period of time. You want to be able to get him to sit there, sustain off his Q, dealing percent damage for as long as possible. Not to mention the fact that he's got Primal Howl and whatnot. And there's a bunch of other useful abilities, but we'll talk about that in a bit and how he functions in team mode. Let me just finish the build off. So I'm going to throw a Spirit Visage in there. Most games I've gotten Spirit Visage on them. There have been a few niche games where the enemy team has absolutely no magic resistance, and I couldn't really justify the cost, but that was pretty rare. From here, you might think about some kind of offensive item. Mostly, you're going to want tanky stats on him, but I tend to get at least one, sometimes two offensive items on him, but even then, they have defensive applications, except maybe Trinity Force. Trinity Force is not my favorite item in the jungler. You can get it. All the stats on Trinity Force are fairly nice. It's very expensive for a jungler. It's a lot easier to get as a top laner. But again, I don't really like him in the top lane. Typically what I end up going for is Iceborne Gauntlet. It works with other people better. It makes you tankier, so you can just kind of sit there and set stuff up. It slows people down. It gives you a lot of mana. More mana than the Trinity Force, which gives, 250, so double the mana. Warwick actually does run into some mana issues, as I kind of mentioned earlier. So with just Trinity Force, you can start to run out. Whereas Iceborne Gauntlet, it gives you a bit more leeway. But mainly, it's just a lot cheaper and a lot easier for junglers to get. And just kind of getting this item, while you're doing your jungle clear is fairly nice for the tankiness. Whereas these items on their own individually, while you're building up to Trinity Force, are not my favorite. None of them give Warwick a huge, punchy impact. And it's just kind of, it's a lot of dead weight while you're building towards it. Although once you do get it, it is nice. You deal a lot of damage, and it really helps your Q sustain and stuff like that. But not the biggest DPS increase in the world. The thing you have to actually consider with Warwick is he doesn't actually have the best AD stats in the game. He has like the lower end of good, I think higher end of average in terms of his base level 1 auto attack, or his base AD. And his scaling is, I think, only 3 per level, which puts him, I believe, kind of in the mid-range to lower mid-range of champions. It's not the worst, but keep in mind, like, really good AD scaling champions, I think, tend to get somewhere between 5 and 6, I believe, per level, AD, whereas bad ones will get, like, 2. And average tends to hover between 3 and 4. So, I mean, it's not the worst. For example, I think he actually has very, very similar AD stats to Hecarim, and you still do get Trinity Force and whatnot on Hecarim as well. So, I mean, it's a thing. It's kind of depending on the sort of game. Do you want Trinity Force? Do you want Iceborne Gauntlet? I just find in most games Iceborne Gauntlet is the way to go for me personally, but your mileage may vary. I'm not going to criticize you too much if you go Trinity Force. Maybe I would if you don't consider the context of the game, but in any case. From there, again, prioritizing CDR. So we're sitting at 30% currently with these items here. So one last item with CDR on it would be something like, I don't know, maybe like Warmogs or something. You know, again, it depends on the game. Defensive items, I don't like saying this is your build kind of thing. Defensive items are very, very context sensitive to the game you're in, and just how much defense you need. So, for example, Wit's End is sort of a hybrid defensive-offensive item, and also kind of, to an extent, supporty as well, because it allows your team to deal more magic damage. So if you got a lot of magic on damage on your team, you can consider that. And boots, again, this is probably the most context-sensitive slot of all. There are actually a lot of options you can go for it. If you really want to catch people out with your ult, better. Boots of Swiftness, not bad. Mobile boots, even maybe you can sometimes justify. Especially if there's any kind of a lot of slows in the enemy team, Swiftness might work. Typically, I find that, again, to enhance the tankiness that you really, really need on this character, I tend to go Ninja no Tabi or Merc Treads. So again, depending on what you want on the game. If you can't quite fill out your build because how the game is working and what items you need with a bunch of CDR items, you might want to consider Ionian boots. If they have a lot of magic resistance, you might consider Sorc boots. I mean, it's not actually that big of a DPS increase when you test it on the targeting dummy, depending on your build, but it's an option. The thing is, the more damage you deal with your Q, the more you heal back as well. So in a sense, it does make you slightly more tanky. But again, most games I just tend to go, you know, because of how team comps work. A lot of the time, I'm just going Ninja no Tabi or Merc Treads. So when we're sitting on here, let's make sure all the things are off. Yeah. So with this sort of tanky, slightly DPS-y build, you know, we're looking at the DPS number here. It's not bad. It's not great. You're dealing damage, and this is without my blood scent even going off. Like, the DPS will start to go up later, but it sits in the mid 200, yeah, so we're at 250-ish range. So yeah, that's again a lot of leeway in this build. You might want to mix in a Dead Man's Plate, some other defensive item. Sometimes you might want to even mix in a Titanic Hydra if you want to do a lot of physical damage and you got a shit ton of HP. But in any case, let's swap things out. So we're going to sell everything here. Just do that real quick. Next, we're going to do a pretty gimmicky build that we're just going to preface this by saying don't do this build, but the pure AP glass cannon build. I'm just going to show it off. It's not, no. It deals damage, sure, but let's just get a Lichbane for 10% CDR there. Next, let's just stick a Death Cap in there because we can. What else has CDR on it? What is that item called? Let's build this thing into that thing. What are we saying? We're 30% now. Let's go. Even with the AP thing, you're probably going to want a lot of CDR, but. And then for our last item, why don't we do? It's probably going to be Void Staff, because again, penetration plus staff. So this is what his DPS is going to look like. It's going to be a lot of damage because, you know, Lichbane's going up and all that. So you can kind of get into, like, you know, the mid 500 range without Blood Scent even going off. But look at his stats. Like, you're going to get blown up before you get in there. And you might be healing a lot with a Q, but, you know, a stiff breeze blows your way, you're going to get utterly annihilated. So this is purely gimmick. You could jump in and destroy someone really quick. Here's the thing. There are several builds that jump in and destroy at least like a single person relatively quickly. The problem is at that point you're essentially a crappier Rengar. Rengar does it better. In a weird sort of way, they have this kind of on the surface similar sort of playstyle, like this hunt someone down and blow them up kind of idea to them. Rengar jumps in, destroys someone immediately, and tries to survive with some of his Healy things, and he's kind of tricky and has stealth and whatnot. Warwick's, like, sort of, essentially his theme actually matches how he's supposed to be played, or when he's often be played, very, very well, which is kind of like hunt someone down and then sort of slowly kill them over time. It's not kill them immediately like Rengar. Again, if you want to do that, just play Rengar. If you want something that is a bit more kind of works with your team, does things over time, and is just very difficult to kill and hunts people down, then Warwick is your answer. Now, with the Primal Howl for 2.5 seconds, you can't get a whole bunch of mitigation and kind of maybe survive a little bit. But yeah, just this is very gimmicky and you can get away with it. But here's the thing in League of Legends, if you build damage on anything, you could theoretically carry any game so long as you're better than everyone around you. That's why damage builds tend to just work very, very well if you're trying to climb and whatnot. But in a realistic game where you're facing even remotely competent or vaguely kind of close to you in terms of skill level, you're going to get punished for builds like this quite a bit. So next, let's move on a little bit. Let's move on to something slightly more realistic. This one isn't as horrible. Oh, incidentally, I didn't build a jungle item last game, did I? Whatever. Like I said, it was a silly build. Anyway. So let's do Tanky AP. So Tanky AP would look something like this. So I'm going to go Rod of Aegis. It's a bit harder to actually fit CDR into this build. But that's another good one. Get that. And you don't get that thing. So we're currently sitting on no CDR. The best way to probably get it in there is... Oh yeah, there's that rocket belt item that gives 10, isn't there? So, well, let's get this plus maybe a rocket belt. There you are, rocket belt. And then for the last item, we're sitting at 20, which is pretty lame. But like I said, anywhere between 30 and 40 is somewhat acceptable. Plus, we don't even have like a Lichbane type item, so we're going to just get Lucidity. And like I said, the stats are a bit more respectable here. Survivability, I mean, the mitigation is not that great. You could mix in a little bit more tankiness and maybe get something going here. Also, keep in mind, Rod of Aegis is not fully stacked up. I could fast forward the game, but that tends to bug it out, so I'm not going to do it right now. So yeah, that's going to look something like this in terms of that. So you would use this. It's an item, so. So the DPS is actually very, very similar to that whole like tank normal build I was talking about, but just has inferior stats. Now in the long run, yes, this does end up working fairly well. You will get more tankier eventually and have more damage with Rod of Aegis, so it does scale up a little bit better, and you can swap out some other items to get more tanky or get more damage and whatnot. The problem with this build is that while you're building up to it, it's really bad. Like, you guys don't get to see it. I've done builds like this several times trying to play through the game, and it is noticeably crappier while you're trying to build into it. The problem with builds that only consider like max 6-item builds is that how many, games actually reach this stage? Not a lot. And the thing is, if you're throwing the early game, you're probably in a bad position to actually be scaling into this in the long run. And your team's probably carrying you and doing better than you overall, and basically just kind of you're on welfare the whole time. Like, your team is the welfare state and you're being propped up. If you had simply just done a better build all along, you guys probably would have done better during the course of that game and hopefully just won earlier without having to reach this stage of the game. Again, it's quite useful to actually have Rylai's on them. I believe it applies it on his autos. Actually, no, it doesn't. I thought it would apply it on his passive, so it doesn't even do that. Now, it's not bad because his Qs come back so quickly, you just keep using them. But in any case, ultimately viable stats in the long run, but similar, essentially a very similar result to Tanky normal, just crappier in the long run, or crappier while you're trying to do it. All right, so let's go, next let's do an on-hit build. Now the problem with the on-hit build is I can't show you guys entirely how effective it is in terms of the DPS, simply because, like, I guess I could show you on Baron or something, or maybe one of the dragons. But the problem is, dummies have 10,000 HP, and on-hit builds tend to deal with percentage damage. So you guys can probably see what the problem is, right? If you have any kind of percentage damage, it is factoring in the fact that you're hitting something with 10,000 HP. You will never, ever in League of Legends, in solo queue, encounter something with 10,000 HP. I think the most HP I've ever had was a very long game with Scion, and I had like maybe close to 8,000. And that was like once. So anyway, let's do, again, unfortunately, I can't show you Blood Razor, so I may as well talk about Blood Razor. Blood Razor is not a terrible item on him. The attack speed actually does get wasted on him in a weird sense. Let me show you something, actually. Because basically, well, I'm just take my word for it. I don't want to do this right now. But Blood Hunt actually overcaps your attack speed if you have any kind of attack speed at all. You actually hit the 2.5 cap if the enemy gets low enough. Now, granted, you have to be down to about 20% or lower. So it's not like, you know, you have that attack speed all the time. But it is something you consider that if they are that low, it is somewhat wasted. But it's not a huge concern because that is only below 20%. So yeah, Blood Razor is not bad. But the problem is that, again, it is most effective when the person is really low health and you have very high attack speed, just innate high attack speed. His attack speed normally is actually not all that good. At least it feels not very good anyway. It's the fact that he gets the Blood Hunt thing that makes his attack speed really good. So Blood Razor, it's not going to be the greatest. It's amusing getting it off with his ult on people and just applying the passive repeatedly with his thing. The thing is, Warwick has so much more to his kit now that I think, especially when I was streaming, I was seeing a lot of people say, try Blood Razor, get Blood Razor. I was like, no, I don't want to. It's not as good. The thing is, I think people are really, a lot of the time, stuck in the old Warwick mindset, where he didn't have a lot to him. And then so his basically one-shot gimmick was using the ult, applying a lot of on-hit crap, and that was kind of it. And Warwick just didn't do much other than that. The thing is, Warwick does do other things now. You're not reliant on applying a whole bunch of his on-hit effects on an ult. Like, it's unnecessary. In fact, I've actually, even with my, what I call the tanky normal build, I've actually killed, like, squishies like an AD carry and stuff, which is not the hardest thing in the world, it's an AD carry. But even, like, as a pure, almost pure tank, I've killed AD carries within about the span of a couple seconds if I ult into them. So, again, I wouldn't prioritize damage too much on this guy. Again, you do need to hit that tanky threshold. Actually, I never mentioned that this game. I should mention that. I can't, this is getting to be a long video, so I may have talked about this, but it is an important point. So if I haven't, I'm going to hammer it home again. Warwick seems to have this tanky threshold. Once he crosses that, again, it's going to change every game, depending on how strong your opponents are and how strong you are and whatnot. But once you seem to hit this point where they just can't kill you anymore and you infinitely sustain, that is when Warwick is his most useful. He's very, very difficult to kill. The entire team is going to have to focus you down and get a bunch of, like, anti-healing, you know, grievous wound stuff on you to just kind of take you down. Even then, it takes a while to get you down. And in the meanwhile, you're just constantly Q shredding people. Tanks just kind of get melted by it. Well, not melted, but take a really good amount of damage over time over it, especially with your CDR. You're constantly just seeing people with Primal Howl going off all the time. You know, again, with CDR. I don't have any CDR. That's why it's at the 11-second cooldown. But you're CCing people all over the place. You're sustaining back any damage people can deal with you. You're just fantastically annoying, and it's just very difficult for the enemy team to deal with. It's like, well, do I kill this guy or try and kill this guy? In the meantime, their DPS is shredding us. If we don't take care of him, he's just constantly fearing us and slowing people because you know, hopefully have a slow item in there somewhere. And he's healing himself up and just shredding the tanks with his percent damage. And so that's when I've seen Warwick at his absolute strongest, when he just gets so tanky and has a ton of CDR. So again, like, I can't really show you what the DPS is going to be like with this, but let's just get, you know, we'll have to simulate the build, essentially. And I can't get Blaze the Rune King again, unfortunately. But aside from that, we'd probably get, like, I don't know, on hit. People would, I think, would want a Trinity. So let's go down either item again. So we get one of those. How's our CDR sitting? So now we're sitting at 48% CDR, so we don't need to worry about anything else. Now in terms of raw damage, just get a Titanic Hydra. And last on-hit item. What do we actually want to do here? It's difficult because we can't get Blood Razor. So instead of that, let's just get attack speed. Is there anything on here we could do? Oh, Gwinsu's. Yeah. Let's obviously put in there.
I killed him first.
So again, pretty high DPS, as you can see there, just from hitting things. Again, the problem is that, like, this is actually a lot tankier than, like, you could do sort of an attack on hit, like tanky build sort of thing. The problem comes in that this is obviously Cinderhulk. This is not Blood Razor. So again, you can kill people pretty quickly with this build. The problem is this is optimal DPS. You got to keep in mind that this is a targeting dummy. It's not moving. It's not going anywhere. It's not trying to like stun you. It's not trying to get away. It's not like knocking you back. It's not dashing away, etc., etc. So like optimal DPS is not the most useful thing in the universe to consider here. So if we sold this, for example, we're going to be sitting on a lot less HP. So these are the defensive stats we're sitting on. And keep in mind, like, the magic resistance does go up a bit. So we're, like, semi-tanky with this item. And we do have some health because of the Titanic Hydra, which is, in a sense, is kind of almost like a hidden on-hit item. So I wouldn't not get this, per se. But this is going to get blown up really quickly. Again, Warwick is not about trying to blow people up immediately, which he's not even the best at. There are better options for it. You're just kind of wasting a lot of Warwick's potential by trying to be like a surprise, you're dead kind of guy. But not the worst option in the world. Certainly better than some of the other very gimmicky builds we've seen. And it's going to be better than the last one, which we're going to do here, which is... Well, actually, since maybe you guys won't take my word on it. So let me show you what happens if I do full on hit build. It gets pretty silly. So we would do something. Oh, I didn't have boots that game. That's what it was. Okay. So I guess in a sense we did simulate an extra on-hit item. So we have Gwinsu's, we have that. Let's do Deadman's. Let's do this thing. And, you know, why not attack speed? And then the last item would probably be something like... why not Train Force? Okay. So yeah, look at this. That's not an actual DPS. That's hitting someone with 10,000. So if you ever run into someone with 10,000 HP, sure, go percentage shred. You know, percentage shred your brains out, but you're not going to run into it too often. Okay, so last thing here. Let's do, for the sake of it, let's show you guys an AD build. So that would be something silly like... I don't know, maybe like that. And I'm talking about like raw AD here. You could mix this in theory with the on-hit build, but kind of a weird mixed metaphor thing. So let's do an Infinity Edge. Infinity Edge obviously goes well with, since we do still want CDR, even with these silly builds, always want to get CDR. So let's get a Phantom Dancer and Essence Reaver. Get some boots. So let's do... Why not attack speed boots? And last item, well, we're going to want some kind of like big AD item in there to make our crits impactful. So let's go, I don't know, Bloodthirster or something. You could kind of really get anything. Or actually, no, let's get, no, let's just do Bloodthirster. You could also get, you know, Death's Dance and whatnot.
You know what you've done.
So obviously, very high DPS, as you guys can see. The problem is, Tsunami, this is Tsunami saying, we're going to steal it for the sake of this video. If you build Master Yi items on any champion, that champion becomes Master Yi. Now, obviously, there's kit differences and whatnot, and certain champions work better with certain, you know, AD, pure AD and stuff like that. But the core of it is yes, you can build raw AD on literally any champion and have a very, very high DPS. Warwick ends up working with it fairly well if you reduce them below half. But I mean, you got to get to this point with this stupid build. You need to get in on someone, get them to half before you get blown up with your complete lack of HP and complete lack of any kind of resistance. So again, pure gimmick build. If you want to blow people up, I'm going to keep hammering this point home. Play another champion. There are champions who are designed to do this better. Warwick functions the best as a tanky AP, or not tanky AP, as a tanky champion with some like a little bit of offensive output and as much CDR as humanly possible. I have seen very, very few champions who function as well with CDR as Warwick does, which is
come back every time you stream.
it's like a rare treat. CDR is an excellent ability, or rather an excellent stat. The unfortunate thing is a lot of champions don't. They have to prioritize like raw damage so much that they can't kind of work with CDR very easily. Warwick is that champion that CDR is just the thing on. So anyway, I don't know how long this video has gone. It's probably gone on a really long time, but I wanted to be kind of like relatively clear with what I'm talking about. I may not have even covered every single nuance that I kind of wanted to discuss. So if anything's unclear in terms of why my thoughts are the way they are, feel free to ask and I can clarify for you guys. But once again, normal tanky and not necessarily exactly the build I showed you. Normal builds are essentially the kind of thing that you want to look at every game and change up at least a little bit every game. Most champions tend to have like 1 or 2 core items that you build almost every game. But beyond that, you really need to think about each game that you're in, what item would be most effective, and tanky items tend to be the most flexible in that sense. So basically work out what tanky stats you need, what order you need them in, how quickly you need the CDR that game. Hint hint, you probably want to get at least a little bit of CDR pretty quickly. And all sorts of stuff like that. So just kind of think about what you need and you'll probably come up with a relatively decent build. Oh yeah, I should probably mention one last item, since I do remember a lot of people talking about it and asking me about it, which is Frozen Melt. Frozen Melt is not a terrible item on him. It is not the best item on him. It is just not, it's kind of middle of the road. There are some games where you can get this item if you really want to slow people down and you don't want Iceborne Gauntlet, but you have your CDR working fine otherwise, and you also want a lot of hit points. I've encountered very, very few games where I wanted it over Iceborne Gauntlet when I wanted that kind of slowdown utility thing. Because, again, this is just kind of a shortcut to a crap ton of CDR. Alright, anyway, that's actually all I have to say on the matter. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you around. Have fun with Warwick, as I'm planning on uploading this video on Tuesday, meaning Warwick should be going live probably tomorrow. So Wednesday. Well, tomorrow, like 2 days from now for me, but tomorrow for you guys. Goodbye.